Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your K9.
And Joanne
And
Soike with For Better For Worse.
and she's on the road, as you can tell, for tonight's topic because we just got done doing a trial this weekend. So, as usual, we're always so let us know you're there. One of the things I wanted to, well, the reason we want to talk about this topic, hi Alicia, is we've had both of us have had a few students that have had some issues with loose dogs. We have had from the dogs being hurt badly to actually being killed. So, and now it seems like it's just more. It's happening more. Wouldn't you agree, Joanne?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can't scroll through your Facebook friends without seeing something at least once a week about somebody being approached by, a loose dog, it seems. So, yep.
So I encountered this a lot when long time ago. I used to have a couple clients that I would walk their dogs with and ended up having a couple of encounters with loose dogs and things like that. So, but it didn't seem like it was that often. And a lot of the times, the dogs that were loose or that were loose dogs were pretty friendly. They just wanted to socialize, which Mary, absolutely. If they were loose and friendly is one thing, but they're loose unsocialized dogs is a whole nother ballgame. So, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. However, one of the things you definitely want to be able to do is read those dogs that are coming up to your dogs, and too. So hopefully we can give you some tips to be able to do or maybe use so that you can stay safer if you have to walk dogs, because not everybody, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't walk my dogs that much because they're with me at work a lot anyway, but we don't go for walks like very often. So so I don't deal with it as much. And I especially am more careful because I have little ones. And I've had my concern is always not that I don't worry about my other bigger dogs, but my little dogs are the ones that concern me, because even if the dog comes up in a playful way, I still have, my dogs are little and they're old and they can get hurt. So I'm a little bit more conservative, but I know everybody doesn't have that option. I know other people have to walk their dogs and have to go out, especially those people that live in the suburbs. That live in the city, and things like that. So I wanted to just chat about that and kind of help give you some tips, right? So the first thing I wanted to kind of mention, yeah, the littles are scary because even if it's a playful lab that comes up to them, they could end up, not in a good place. So the one of the things I wanted to address is when you're walking, and this is where it seems to be more of an issue too when you're walking multiple dogs. It is difficult to have a good handle on things when you have multiples, when you have two dogs that you're having to walk. And I understand sometimes you don't have an option, but I want you to think outside the box a little bit. So if you have to take your dogs out to go potty in the morning, maybe the morning they don't, a long walk isn't warranted. You can't give them a very long walk. You can just get them out there to potty, and maybe in the evening or midday, if you have time, you can give them another longer walk where you're able to be a little more focused, versus in the morning when you're trying to get ready for work and all that kind of stuff. So, because that's actually something I had to do when I was in that situation, having to walk the dogs, because I didn't have a yard and I had to walk them. So we just give them a quick walk in the morning, got them pottied, and then the evenings is when we would go on for longer walks and things like that. So it would reduce the exposure in the morning, especially. But anyway, just a thought. But so the first thing I wanted to talk about is when you're walking your dogs, you should be aware of what's going on around you. Like, keep your head looking around, look behind you sometimes, so you're always aware. And I know it's not a fun walk when you're doing it this way, but that's what it is, right? You can't. Other people don't socialize their dogs, or they let the dogs run loose, and they have no control over them, and then they end up, coming after your dog. So it's always easier if you can see them coming before things happen, right? Instead of the surprise, the element of surprise that you're just, you're there. So paying attention to your surroundings, every once in a while, look behind you and just be more aware of what's going on in the area, and you should anyway. Especially those of you who have little dogs or whatever. We and Joanne can elaborate. Some people want to take your dog, so which is a bigger problem, right? So go ahead, Joanne.
I just sharing a story. I know someone who was just recently visiting. I believe it was Bloomington, Illinois. So she was down visiting some friends, and if you guys all heard the story about Lady Gaga and her Frenchie, that pretty much exact story happened to this lady. Two people came up and literally beat the crap out of her and tried to steal her small dog. And what do you do in that point? She basically said adrenaline kicked in, and I knew I was fighting. If I stopped fighting, my dog would be gone. So she said, I don't know how I got through it. She said, but I did, and I never let go of him. Her face was black and blue, two swollen eyes. It was really, really awful. She needed medical attention. So it was a serious altercation. So I don't know what people are planning on doing or how much, money you think you can sell a dog for, but it's a different level, right? There are some just unsocialized dogs. There's some silly people out there, but this stuff is next level. So just be aware that, that's a thing, and it's hit Illinois. So just be careful.
Right. And so being aware of what's your surroundings is really important, like really important. Seeing who's around, what's around. It's so important. So the other thing is, and this is where, and Patty kind of hit the next, preemptively hit the next thing, is people walking their dogs while they're on their phone. Because it is hard to be aware of your environment when your head is buried on the phone. So you should have your phone with you for safety, or if you need to call someone or whatever, but you shouldn't be looking at your phone and walking your dog. Because then it's like you have that single focus on your phone, not your dogs. And I know and especially those of you who live in the city probably see that really often. I see it around here, people walking their dogs, but they're looking at their phone. So it's like, that's kind of a no-no when you're driving and when you're, walking your dog.
I'm not looking at it. I just want you to know, I'm not looking at it. So Ronnie, even we had one come to the house. Oh yeah, especially in a rural area, Ronnie, you have loose dogs all the time, because people think, oh well, if they're too stupid they're not worth keeping if they're going to, run away, right? And so they have, and then you're returning the dog or whatever, and the owner and lives out, lives outside. So the rural areas are pretty dangerous. So definitely wanting to make sure that you keep, you're aware of what's going on. So a couple of things I've done when I was approached by a loose dog. One of them is a trick that Patricia McConnell told me. I used to carry kibble in my pocket when I used to walk the dogs. And if I was approached by a dog, a loose dog, I would throw kibble at it. A lot of time it was just enough of a startle for the dog. And a lot of the dogs at that time weren't very aggressive, so they were just started eating the kibble that I threw out. And I was able to throw enough out to keep them busy enough that I was able to get away. And I did have to use that technique once, and luckily it worked really well, and I was able to get into a yard, or in a way where the dog would be able to stay away from me. So that was a little trick that I learned from Patricia McConnell, which worked super, super well, and I was pretty happy. However, it's not going to help you if you have a aggressive dog come after you, right? It just doesn't work like that.
And yeah, Alicia, you're hitting it on the head. It's people not being aware, and so that's why we, the ones that are worried about it, need to be more aware of that environment. And the other thing, and I think a lot of the reason that happens is we all have normalcy bias, right? It hasn't happened. Nothing bad has happened so far, so it's probably not going to happen. And we get all very complacent about that instead of staying pretty vigilant about our, where our dogs are, and being too laid back about it. Like nothing bad has happened, so nothing bad's going to happen. So, and that we all have that tendency. Since nothing bad's happened doesn't mean it won't. So always just being aware that it can happen and it may happen, and you should be aware of it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's enough stories out there. I'm sure everybody has a friend who's had something bad happen. So just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it's not happening frequent enough for you to be worried about it.
Oh my God, a stun gun. So the other thing you can get that I used to carry for those dogs that are aggressive is Direct Stop. You can get that on Amazon. And it's like a pepper spray for the dogs. And unfortunately, it does work very well. You are vigilant if you have a reactive dog. You're also looking for a dog, you also need to have something. And that's why you want to be vigilant and be prepared with either a handful of kibble or the Direct Stop if you need it. So you can stop the situation before it becomes a big problem. Well, yeah. So that's the big problem, right, Carrie? Reactive dogs and loose dogs is a pretty bad combo. Just saying. So that's why for dogs that tend to be reactive, I would carry something like Direct Stop, because it just, things will get out of hand much quicker in that situation. If you have a dog that's going to be reactive to another dog that's loose, and then the loose dog may have not been intended to, have a situation, but because your dog's reactive, it can become a big problem. So I think everybody needs to have something, especially if you have to walk your dog, like a Direct Stop or whatever. That works really, really well, right? And being more vigilant if you have a reactive dog, right? I have littles frequently happen, so I'm willing to do whatever. Yeah. You can, Mary, but that's why if you're vigilant and you see the dog coming, you would be able to spray the dog. So that brings us to another training situation. So one of the things you definitely want to train your dog, especially those of you who walk your dogs very often, is that you should have a command, an emergency command, so that you can step in front of your dog and your dog can stay back there, right? It's, oh God, what's the name of it? Where the dog can stay behind you if there's a dog coming, and you can then, handle the dog that's coming at your dog, so you're not having a dog out in front of you. And this is one of the things, if you're not vigilant, it's not gonna work. So you can say, back up, get behind me, or whatever, a command where you can step in front of your dog and your dog will stay back there instead of trying to get ahead of you. And this is if your dog's not reactive. If your dog is reactive, I'm telling you this is not going to be, you can try to practice it and try to do it, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be tough. For a dog that's reactive, they're going to try to lunge and go after the other dog. But if you don't have a reactive dog, like with my littles, I can step in front of them, they can wait back there, and then handle the dog that's coming our direction, right? And again, this is only effective if your dog isn't as reactive, right? Or if your dog is anxious, it'll probably work great. So then that way you don't have and the truth is, Mary, you might spray your own dog, inadvertently, because it might be windy. You don't know. But I'd rather risk spraying my own dog a little bit than having another dog come at it and hurt it, right? So it'll be uncomfortable for a bit, but they'll be alive to talk about it, right? Yeah, you teach a sit stay. You can teach a sit stay and work your position, and work your positioning, right? But I would call it something else: sit and then behind me or something like that, or get out of behind me and they can stay behind you is the other one. So
yeah,
because this is an emergency one only. This is for emergencies only. I'm sorry, go ahead, Joanne.
No, I was just going to comment on that. When you're teaching these emergency commands, guys, just think about in your day-to-day life how many
Get
times
back.
you accidentally say the word come or sit or whatever, and maybe you're not actually following through. So when you are teaching this, it should only be used in training situations until you really, really need it, right? Don't throw it into like every day I'm going to use it when we get to the door, or I'm going to use it here, right? It's good to train it, but you do need to train it a lot to have it super solid. So when the situation turns, your dog's going to be nervous as well. I mean, they're going to read that dog long before you are, right? And so that's just where kind of like the sit stay. If you have a great dog that does it most of the time, and they see a dog that has intent coming at them, and you're like sit stay, they might be like right, like I'm not doing that. My safety is in jeopardy, and I'm not listening to you because it's my personal safety. So just think about that scenario.
Yes, right. And I'm going to put a link. It's called it's not it's a part, it's kind of like a direct stop. It's on Amazon. It's called Halt 2 Dog Repellent. So that's a one. It's an option, right, to be able to have that pet protector. There's a couple of different ones out there that you can use and order, on Amazon or whatever, and just to have it. And don't forget, after a while, because I know I had one that I didn't use for a long time, and and honestly, it was no good after a while. So just FYI, you might need to buy more, more. And I think Chewy sells it as well. It's called Pet Safe. There's another one. So those are some options for you that you can maybe buy that. Again, especially if you have a reactive dog, it's very challenging. But yeah, that's what Kristen Schmidt actually said. It's a good one. Get Back is a great one. You can call it, Get Back or whatever. And it should be an emergency only. And as Joanne said, only use it when you need it, right? Don't use it or, use it all the time in your regular life, right? And so the thing is, for those of you with multiple dogs, you might have to practice with one dog, then the other, and then both.
Yeah.
Right? Don't try to do both dogs because it's awful.
And Suzanne Clothier had a really, really great command. I know when I was working with her, she says Mayday, right? Yeah. Because it's really hard to throw Mayday into a generic training situation. You're not going to accidentally use that. It's you have to really have intent to say that word to the dog. So I really like that.
Yeah, Mary Enstrom is the only one that can't use it because her dog's name is Mayday. So it doesn't work for her, but for other people, yes, it could work really well.
Nice. Yes, what did you need?
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Mary's dog is named Mayday, so there you go. Not, but something like that would be.
Yeah.
It's hard and that's why, Alicia, you want to be a lot more aware of what's going on, and just be always, vigilant about what's around you and things like that. So it's one of those things that. So those are a couple of things, and the command to step in front of the dog and be able to fend it off and things like that. And you can, and that's something you can practice with friends, right? If let their dog come at you, step in front of the dog, so your dog's going to be, which is hard because your dog's going to want to play with the other dog if they're friends. But it's one of those things you can, because remember, this kind of stuff is life and death stuff, right? It's like if you have a bad situation or a bad incident, you're going to do whatever. And the other thing that should go without saying, but it's hard, is to stay calm, which is really hard when you have a dog coming at your dog, coming at you, not sure what's going on. You definitely want to know. You definitely want to stay calm. And the other thing, you want to learn how to read dog body language so that you know if you're really under threat or you're not. And you're going to know it if you see the dog, how the dog approaches, right? So being able to read the other dog is really important. For example, a dog that's wagging his tail doesn't mean it's friendly. But it also, a dog that's baring his teeth and maybe barking doesn't mean is aggressive either, right? So you really want to be able to read the whole dog, the whole picture, so that you can have a better idea of what you're really dealing with. So you can be able to assess the situation in a quick manner, in a calm manner, so that not everybody's panicking. Because it's a very stressful situation when you're encountering a loose dog, especially those of you who have a reactive dog, because even though the dog that's approaching your dog may have no intention of hurting your dog, if depending on how that interaction goes, you might have a bad situation on your hands.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you guys, not to scare anybody, but just to be brutally honest, this is why it's very important to be vigilant, because if a dog truly has intent to hurt your dog, you won't hear it coming. It will not be growling and snarling and doing a bunch of things. It will come silently and it will be quick. So, right, the dogs that truly really are out to harm and kill other dogs or other animals, they don't make a lot of noise.
Right. So Dave Stone's really good comment, which is very awesome. He says, I have to share that his sister-in-law, an avid hiker in bear country, inadvertently sprayed herself with pepper spray in a confrontation. It made her less appealing and the bear left her alone. If you're using spray, make sure you practice again before you carry it with you. Absolutely. Because you definitely don't want to spray yourself in that situation with an altercation with another dog. So yeah, use that. And also another good point to that is you do want to practice with the direct stop and make sure it's still working after a while, right? Because those things aren't meant to last for years and years and years, because some of us can go years without not having an issue, and others will have more of a problem. So the other situation too, if you have a owner with a dog, because this is what we get a lot of, right? The dog is loose and the handler is like, really far away. They're calling the dog and the dog's not really interested in returning to them, which becomes a bigger problem. So then, and instead of just have a conversation with that handler and say, hey, this is a dangerous situation. My dog isn't friendly. And oh my gosh, what was I going to say? So that is a really important, aspect. Oh, I know. I was going to talk about the Flexi. Does siren work to scare the dog away? It may. For some dogs, it may, and for some dogs, it doesn't. Depends on the dog. Yeah,
Yep.
Sometimes some noise might those air horn things might work too, to scare the dogs away. But it really depends if the dog cares about the sound. They might not. Depends. But
Yep.
And those of you that walk your dog on a Flexi, that is a pretty big issue if you walk your dog on a Flexi, because then your dog is, it's hard to get a handle on things when you're using a Flexi. So
Yes, if you want some disgusting photos, go and Google Flexi leash injuries. You'll find some
yeah.
what probably equivalent to ER photos.
So Cheryl says she screams if she sees a loose dog and an owner and they think you're crazy and they avoid me. Well, that works too. That works too, because it'll keep and they'll want to keep the dog away from you as well, which is not a bad thing. So those are the pepper spray and stuff are pretty strong things. You definitely want to be able to have something more powerful than kibble. Kibble is okay if the dog's friendly, and that's what I mean. You really want to be able to read the dogs and what their body language is telling you, because sometimes if the dog is away, a lot of them are scared, or they're very dog friendly and they want to approach your dog. Every once in a while, now depending, every once in a while, you have dogs that are truly aggressive dogs that have gotten out of their yards and things like that. So those are the more scary ones, and that's where it's a little bit more of a situation, right? Where you can have some injury and dogs can get really hurt by that.
Yep. And another one, if you're really not comfortable having the spray, right? Another one that you can use is an umbrella. But again, you really have to practice with it, right? Can you hold your leash? Can you open the umbrella? But if you have a big enough one, sometimes just that big flap open is enough as a deterrent, and it's also enough to sort of kind of use to shield and protect your dog. But you probably only have a couple of times at that. If it doesn't scare the dog off, they're going to find a way. So again, that's kind of another little option if you want to try that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the umbrella is a great idea, especially the ones that you press the button and it pops open. So you definitely have to practice with your dog to make sure your dog isn't afraid of it before you practice it, because your dog might be like, holy crap. And then you have your dog trying to get away from it and a dog trying to come at your dog. So all those things are things that you need to practice and work on before. And I'm going to tell you, one of our students, had an incident last week. She was in her driveway, putting her dog in her car to come to class, and the neighbor's dogs got loose and came after her dog in that situation. So that's what I mean about being hypervigilant, right? Was really, it surprised her. Obviously, she wasn't expecting it. She's in her driveway. It's like, why would you think that would be a problem? And luckily, nobody was hurt. Everything turned out all right. Her dog was all right, but her dog was also a very young dog, and could have been, affected by it. But luckily, he didn't seem to be. But that was a you don't expect to have that somebody come up your driveway. But like Ronnie said earlier, some dogs come right to the house, right? They're right there, and they're and a lot of times you can catch them and send them back home, but they're going to keep getting away, especially if they live outside, especially out in the rural areas. They do. Yes, Aaron, about picking up your smaller dog. Well, not so much that the little dog is vulnerable. It's you that become more the target. If you pick up your small dog, the dog will try to go after you, right? And then depending on how you pick them up and where you put the little dog, yes, you can make them more susceptible to more serious injury, right? Because if they grab a leg or something like that, then you're talking a pretty significant harm that maybe would have been avoided had that dog not been put down. But it's more so picking up a small dog will actually make you more susceptible to getting bit too, which is, most of us would take a bite for a little dog.
And not even bit, but injured, right? I mean, yes, bit, but injured as well. Because if you have a dog that's really intent on getting at your dog, they're going to come at you full force. And if you are, right, you're not sure where your balance is, you don't have it because you've just picked up your dog, a dog is much more likely to knock you over. And now you're on the ground and you have no ability to protect your dog anymore, right? So I don't know that there's a great answer to that, right? Because if I don't pick them up and I can't step in front of the dog, right, what do you do then? So I think it's just situation by situation, really. But understand, right, if it's a big dog, you definitely are much more open to getting knocked down.
Right. Yeah, Deb, a lot of people, I have to say, Deb said that so many people in the neighborhood walk their dogs off leash because it's almost like people think that they have more control over their dogs than they do because they don't proof them. That's the big problem. If you're going to have your dog off leash, your dog should be able to come back to you 100% of the time because because you're right, so much can go wrong. If something happens that your dog decides, I'm not going to go back to her, or something else is really interesting, you might lose your dog. You can lose your dog. You can have them get hit by a car. You can have there's so much that can go wrong when you have your dogs off leash. And I know a lot of times, and then it's really hard too because dog parks are not a great option either. So it's really challenging for people to be able to exercise their dogs, being able to give them some freedom and let them run without in a safe environment. And I don't know, maybe there's a business on a business idea in there somewhere where you can pay to bring your dog and have him run on or something. I don't know, but because it's really hard, you can't take them to a dog park. You can't. Going for walks is really crazy. So what do you do? But you keeping your dog safe and if you want to have that ability to have your dog off leash, you better be able to call your dog back, right? Otherwise, and I mean from everything, another dog, a person, a squirrel, or whatever. If you're not sure your dog is going to leave any of those things alone, you're in trouble. I wouldn't do it, right? Depending on the situation. Aaron said, well, you know somebody whose dog got bit severe injury due to the bites in the abdomen. A person, Aaron, or a dog? The dogs had bites of the abdomen. Yeah, unfortunately, one of our lovely students, her dog actually got killed by another dog. So she didn't survive the attack. So it was a really very, very sad situation. And unfortunately for all involved. And it was just some random dog that got loose and all that stuff. Big stalling Doberman came from. So Cheryl was charged. All I saw was teeth. I faced the dog, leaned down a bit, screamed no, and it worked. Dog stopped. Owner came running. Yeah. So and that's the problem, right? Luckily, that dog clearly was not aggressive, Cheryl, but still, right? It's a very and that's what I mean. So Smidge already knows to go between your legs or have a safe spot to be when those things happen, right? Oh, they got a ticket. Oh, yeah, Chicago, not so much. Too many loose dogs here and not enough people enforcing it. So that's unfortunately the sad part. Yeah, it could have been terrible depending on, especially when you have a large dog like a Doberman and a little bitty dog. Fortunately, and that's what I mean. I don't know what the right answer is because educating the public has really been challenging because people still think it's okay and they have dogs that are running loose and just doing whatever. So that's why it's gonna. Unfortunately, the people who have the dogs that we need to protect, then we have to do what we have to, right? If that means pepper spray, a horn, or whatever we need to do to protect our dogs, we're going to do it. And so being aware of what's going on around us is really important. And that's and I think and I talked to my nosework students about situational awareness, like what looks right, what looks okay, what looks normal, right? Because in that way you can see if there's things that are going to be off. The other thing is a lot of times we get a feeling, right, that something's just not quite right. It's usually we're pretty right on about it. The pity mix got the shepherd away. Yeah. So yeah, it's we people are letting, and now we're seeing an influx of unsocialized dogs with dogs and people, lots of them, and so I think the situation is going to get worse, not better. So we have to be able to protect our dogs, right? So teaching them like Mayday or like except from you, Mary, and to stay away and keep away and be able to just be more vigilant, which really, I'll be honest, takes a lot of the fun out of a walk, right? Because you have to be so on guard with the dogs, right? It takes a lot of the fun away from what we want to experience with our dogs. So that might mean that you might have to go elsewhere to go on the long walks where it's a little safer, and maybe just have potty walks, which are short and quicker in in your regular daily life, right?
So speaking of that, right? I mean, if whatever your reason is, you live in a homeowners association or something like that where you're not allowed to have a fence, one of the things that you can do, if you ever go to a big conformation dog show, you'll walk up and you'll see motorhomes and all of the X pens everywhere. It is a really nice option if you get a nice tall X pen, actually 2 or 3 of them, and you can connect them together, right? And most dogs are not gonna try to challenge that to knock it over. So it's a nice option for if that's something you could have near your house, in your backyard, that's not technically a fence. That would be a safe way to let your dog, have its chance to go potty, not on a leash. So if you're really struggling with your own neighborhood or your own space, that's just a nice secure way that you can give them an option as well.
Right, especially if you're having a difficult time with a walk on that particular day. And yeah, Deb, very well said. We need to be on guard without causing alarm in our dogs, because that is what happens. So by being vigilant and be situationally aware, I am talking, you're still going to be relaxed. You're just going to be more, scan the environment more, look behind you every so often, things like that you should really be doing anyway for safety, especially, and a lot of people, and I'm going to be honest, I also feel that sense of security. I have 2 big German Shepherds, and so yeah, in them, I don't really worry about getting hurt or attacked or anybody coming up at me. But it could still happen. They might want that shepherd, they might want that dog, and they might try to take it from me. But I have that sense of, I have a big tough dog. They're not gonna, nothing's gonna, nobody will come up to me. But there are that situation, right, where they will come up to you and they will try to take your dog, or bring their dog to your dog or something like that. So it's something to really consider, because I had that every once in a while. I'm like, nobody's going to come up to me. I have a big shepherd. It's like, that's not true. Luckily, I've never had a problem, but I'm also now a little bit more vigilant about my shepherd's a very delicate flower, and I don't want anybody to hurt him.
Nobody wants my Doberman, so we're good that way. But no, I think though it's we've been talking kind of about the aggressive dogs and the that sort of thing, but I think one of the other things that is really becoming prevalent lately is the friendly dogs. And then when you try and have a nice conversation with someone, people are like, well, if your dog can't handle interaction, maybe you shouldn't be out walking. And it's like, no, there's leash laws for a reason. So I hate to be the old crotchety old lady, but if you're really noticing somebody and you've done your due diligence to try and be nice and to try and explain why, I do think that's the point where animal control needs to know, right? Like, there are loose dogs and I'm uncomfortable. I can be on these streets the same as someone else, right? And they're not following the law. And so that's a moment where hopefully your animal control officer would be able to come by, and at least take a report. They may not do anything the first time, the third time, the 10th time, but remember, every time you file a report, that's going on file. So they're going to have that eventually.
Right. And yeah, unfortunately, Sue's right. Leash laws are ignored. I love your tip, Alicia. She says carrying a little flashlight with at least 100 lumens and lighting it in the other dog's eyes when they approach might disorient them. That's a really great tip. I love that. And it's not really gonna hurt the other dog, but I love having that. Yeah, it causes them a little bit of disorientation. And it's 100 lumens of a flashlight. That's a really great. I'm gonna put that in the notes because that is awesome. I love that. And especially if you're able to get it on time, that would be fantastic.
Well, and I'll tell you guys, I'm not gonna look for it, but I have it right here in the car. I have one that I don't know if can you see this?
Yes.
So it's really nice and easy to carry, and the on button is right on top there. So it's super, super bright. It's an LED. And it's just kind of a nice stick. You can have it in your pocket. You can have it in your hand. I don't know where my mom got it for me for Christmas. It says it's a Kodiak brand. So if you want to look, it's real nice nice and easy to carry. So you don't have to have a giant flashlight. They make them small these days.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like that. Well, and then Erin brings up a very good point for those of us with guardian type dogs. She brings up a great point. If you have a little dog that's going to come after your dog, your big dog, and your big dog happens to grab it, you really need to. That's another issue altogether, right? So it's not somebody coming after your dog, is a dog approaching yours, and your dog is going to maybe not take so kindly to the visit from the little yapping Chihuahua or Yorkie. And I have those small yappy Chihuahuas too, but they're not loose to be able to torture the street. So yeah, because the truth is, if something in that situation, if you have a large dog with a little dog coming after them, and your big dog hurts that little dog, it becomes a big deal, because then your dog will be blamed for whatever the situation is. So it's one of those things that I definitely want to be on alert with, and that's what I mean with the little dogs. Sometimes the food or just anything, direct stop will help keep them away. But that's a whole different problem, right? Especially if your dog is on leash, they're not on leash. Those are all important things to consider, because yeah, you're right. It goes both ways. If some little dog comes up and he comes up to your big Doberman, and your Doberman's like, "Oh no, you didn't, little man," and there's a situation, you're going to be the one blamed anyway, because your dog hurt the little dog.
Who are you talking about? I'm not talking about my Doberman.
No. All right.
So,
thanks, Alicia, for putting that in there. That was great.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other things I think it's important to kind of talk about, and again, this is a whole nother Facebook Live, right? How to handle the situation. But if you're not next to a busy street, and the safety factor of fending off a dog, or the safety factor of your dog running off, if an altercation has started, right, you really should drop your dog's leash. Okay.
Yes.
Gives your dog a better chance to defend itself, because they're going to read that other dog's movements much quicker than you are. And you'll also be able to not have to worry about two things at once, right? You don't want to do it if you're by, the interstate or a really, really busy road. But, if something is happening to you, it is much better to drop your dog's leash, so that you can kind of intervene in the situation and give your dog a better chance.
Right. Of being able to defend himself or get away if it needs to, right?
Right.
Or for you to be able to interrupt the altercation, which is hard when you're trying to protect your own dog, right? So it's one of those things. So it's, yeah, and she's right, and be careful about trying to pull dogs apart. Usually most of the damage, or the very serious damage, is caused by two people trying to separate dogs and pull them apart. It causes a lot of tearing, and it gets pretty rough. Yeah, Patty's like, I've shown a light in the coyote's eyes. Yeah, I betcha they don't like it. But yeah, and that's a kind of a nice way. Very coyotes for the little dogs, because they're snacky. For the coyotes, is definitely they don't like it, and they are also, coyotes typically are more worried about humans than they are about other dogs, and so they would be more apt to hopefully run away from the person and leave the dogs alone, right? So yeah, thanks, Alicia, for that. That's really good. And so I can get to it quickly. Yeah, a flashlight on a lanyard. But yeah, that's another option too, right? So the one of the things, especially for those of you, the biggest thing I think we see is 1,200 lumens. Wow. Is that like a spotlight, Ronnie?
you get that off a cop car?
Exactly. Yeah, off the fire truck. Anyway, so you and these are some really options so that you can be prepared. But as Dave mentioned, you definitely want to practice whatever you're going to use to make sure you can coordinate it and do it before you need it, because it's not a training that we think about doing, right? You don't think about tossing, what happens if a dog's coming at your dog and you have to reach in your pocket and get treats and throw it at the dog. I mean, can you do that pretty smoothly? Can you do that pretty confidently? Can you get and step in front of your dog and your dog's going to stay there while you try to fend off the other dog? Can you do that and get to your direct stop quick enough to be able to stop the dog from coming at your dog? So those are all training things that you should be practicing. And those of you who walk your dogs every day have a lot of opportunities to do that. And don't wait till it's an emergency, right? Be more prepared than, there's a training issue as well, right? If you have Elisa says, if you have a dog that would probably become bite or aggressive if another ran up to it, my dog on leash, the other dog's loose. If my dog wore a muzzle, well, it might be a precaution how to impact their sense of being. Yeah, and that's true, Elisa, because if you put a muzzle on your dog that might bite another dog, then the dog wouldn't be able to defend itself. And it actually, for a dog that's already worried about other dogs, would make it so much worse because they know they can't protect themselves and defend themselves. So you need to be able to even consider that, right? Because some people, my dog's reactive, but if another dog comes up on your dog, your dog should have the opportunity to, as Joanne said, to protect itself and keep itself from getting hurt, right?
Yeah. And guys, I mean, I know a lot of people enjoy going for walks, right? They really do. But if you're dealing with a reactive dog, I mean, depending on the severity, I might avoid walks for a little while if you live somewhere or, you know that this happens frequently in your neighborhood. I might put my dog in the car and go for a walk somewhere else, that's
Right.
a little more secluded. Okay, that's absolutely an option because remember, most dogs are reactive because they're fearful of other things coming at them, right? And so if you're somewhere where you're worried about it, you're going to have to fend that off. It's not worth it. The walk isn't worth it for what might be enjoyable to turn into a really bad situation and then stick, right? Where that's something that's gonna be with them for years. It's better to just avoid that.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. And it's really hard. And I understand where people are coming from, you guys. It's like you can't go for a walk. You can't go to the dog park. It's crazy. Yeah. Go somewhere else. And you know what? When I used to have a dog that was in the Midnight Dog Walkers Club, and I did have that. And that's exactly what I would do. I would get my dog in the car, go somewhere far away because and walk the dog somewhere else because it was just walking him was just horrible. And at that time I lived in an apartment and I didn't have a yard and all that stuff. So if you have a situation where you're in that, that's what I mean. You might have to consider having for potty, especially if you don't have a yard, have a place where they can go potty in the morning, take care of business, and then maybe at a later time when there's more time, you go for a longer walk and all that stuff because it's really, And I think Joe Butler's on the call. One of her dogs keeps getting up early to go for a walk. Well, on top of it being dangerous for the dog, it's also dangerous for the handler, right? To be outside at that hour, and have you don't know what's out there either, especially if you're by yourself and somebody who can hurt you and all that. That's what I mean about being very situationally aware. You need to be mindful of what you're doing, what's going on around you when you're out there, especially when, because we tend to be focused on our dogs and what they're doing and all that stuff in some cases and not pay attention to what's around. And that's how things happen, right? Yeah. I know you have, Sue. Penny gets to travel the world so she can have a walk. And Penny's reactive on top of that. So when you're getting having a barrage of things, but you definitely want to the big thing, the big takeaway is there's some options, like other things that you can have. You need to have your head on a swivel and be real careful about what's around you and be able to practice using the tools that you have to protect you and your dog. Don't wait until the altercation happens or the situation is at hand to then be able to try it, because like Dave said, his sister sprayed herself, because in that moment of panic, you're not going to be so well coordinated, right? You're going to be fumbling a little bit, things like that. So you want to be able to practice using it. I know your probably neighbors are going to think you're crazy, but you should try that.
Yeah. And when you practice, it really should be a 3-part progression, right? You should practice by yourself.
Right.
So that you can get comfortable with whatever you're trying to use, then practice with your dog, right? And then hopefully you never get to the third step, which is practice, in real life. So, yeah, but always try and manage these things without your dog first, so that you can get a little comfortable before you introduce them into that training situation.
Right. And I know, Alicia, it's really sad because the little dogs are really an off-leash little dog runs such a much bigger risk of dying, because they could get attacked by a dog that's on leash when they will walk up to them, or hit by a car because people don't see it. I mean, it's like, I don't understand what people's thought process is. And again, I don't know what the right answer is, but you're going to have to, one of the things right now, it's more defensive, right? Make sure you keep your head out. Make sure you have practice all these things so that you can protect yourself. I wish there would be a better answer, right? You have to find a park where you can take your dog with you, and running off leash might not be the option that you want, or being able to keep your dog safe. And the neighborhood, like Linda says, she sees a lot of dogs at the parks than in the neighborhood. Yeah, Linda, because people take their dogs to the park to run, and so yeah, they're off leash and they have no control over the dog. And then people get a false sense of security when they take the dog to the park. The dog does a couple recalls pretty well, and then they then they're like, oh, my dog's really well trained. No, it just happens. He's well trained as long as there's no other dogs, but when he sees another dog, it's going to be hard to call him off. So those are all things that you want to train, right? And be able to know your dog can come off another dog, your dog can come off a child, your dog can come off a person, and the dog can come off a squirrel or whatever. And then your dog should be able to come back to you no matter what. And until you have that 100%, I wouldn't, there's dogs shouldn't be off leash, but people just get this false sense of, oh, my dog comes when we're just alone together. Yeah, but you're alone together, not with anybody else, right? There's a great new app called Sniff Spot. It's like an Airbnb, but taking your dog for a private property for an hour. That's a awesome idea. So it's called Sniff Spot. Alicia's put it on the thing. Lisa, it's like an Airbnb, but for taking your dog to a private property for an hour or so to be off leash by itself, or with just dogs that it gets along with. Love that. That's brilliant. I put that in the chat. I'm going to check that out. That's fantastical. And I know for those of you, even if you're not, most of us aren't going to be able to do that all the time, but every once in a while, the dogs get that opportunity to run and do stuff. That's awesome. I love that. I am going to check that out. I love that idea. And I think that's what, right, from all these problems and issues, out comes another option, right, or something else that can help be able to have your dogs run around and do other things and enjoy their time together, which I think is you want to have that for your dog, but not at the risk of losing your dog or having some bad thing happen. So just think about those kind of things. It's very reasonable, like $10, and there's Sniff Spot all over the U.S. That's fantabulous. Love it. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's true, Mary. Cat or fast cat trials are another way to let the dogs run. You got that right. And Erin lets her dogs run in the tennis courts near the house when nobody's playing tennis. Yeah. So yeah, I think we all have to be a little more creative, But the big thing, and I know I don't have the answer. The big thing is, how do you educate the general public to keep their dogs on leash and keep them safe and keep them, as dog trainers, we can only hit certain groups of people at a time, and we can educate them as much as we can. But the truth is, just the general public, there's just a whole different mindset about dogs and being off leash and things like that. And it's just to change how all of us see that, right? And now, in Europe, there's a lot of dogs off leash and the dogs can be together, but in the U.S. we still don't have that. We're not there for sure. Joanne, you have anything to add?
No, I'm with you. Like, I wish there was something we could do. Like, here's a flyer of all the reasons why you shouldn't let your dog off leash, but I'm just getting this weird sense of entitlement from people that's like, well, if your dog can't handle my dog off leash, that's your problem. And it's just
Yes.
not true, So, I mean, if you said that around kids, well, if you can't handle my kid hitting your kid, maybe your kid shouldn't be in class, in recess. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make any sense when you turn it around. So, just, I don't know.
Yeah.
You start a community group of like, what's a good way to educate people? You know what I mean? Like, because that's really what it is to educate the general public how dangerous it can be, right?
Right. Mary says, I just cringe when I am out walking my dogs and I hear Fluffy from down the street because I know it's going to be a loose dog with no owner controls. I know, right? And it's a tone, right? It's a tone that you hear, that desperation. It's like, no. Yeah, I know. It's terrible. And people won't listen. Yeah. It's just, so it's somehow to educate the people, the public. But from these things, like that sniff smut, I was looking at it. I'm like, how cool is that? You can book a spot and it's really reasonable. I think that's fabulous. It'll be worth the peace of mind, right? And if your dog does have some friends that can go out and run around and do stuff, that's fantastic. Right. Yeah, that's true. Fines. I think, Alicia, you're right. I think like where Cheryl lives, there's big fines for off leash, like up to $500. And I think that's what's going to have to take, right? Unfortunately, it's it's punishment, right? We have to punish them for that behavior because the leash laws are not enforced. So.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that scenario, right? Because it's like I said, it's that sense of entitlement. Well, if the law finally comes at you and says, no, you're not entitled to that, maybe that's what it will take to change some people's minds.
Yeah, really. All right, all. I hope you found some tips that would help keep your dog safe as best as we can, because it's a tough situation, very tough. And and it's heartbreaking for us when we hear our students' dogs got hurt, or we had a dog go to the dog beach and have drains put in and all that because it was just because of a bad incident, right? Dog shouldn't have been there. So, all right. Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.